At just 17 years old, Collingwood, Ontario's Leah Denbok published her first book of photographs. In it, she captured the lives of men and women who often seem invisible to many people. It was the first of 2 volumes called Nowhere to Call Home, Photographs and Stories of People Experiencing Homelessness. Proceeds from that volume went to the Salvation Army's Barrie Bayside Mission Center. With Volume 2 just now becoming available, we're pleased to welcome to our studio writer and photographer Leah Denbok and Major Doug Lewis, Executive Director, Barrie Bayside Mission Center. How do you both?
Hi.
It's nice to have you here.
Excellent, thank you.
Leah, in Volume 1 of Nowhere to Call Home, you point out that you only published the book as a result of the support of Joel Sartore, who's a photographer with National Geographic. How did he come to know about your work?
So when I had first started taking pictures, I was 12 years old, and I had just found a lot of interest in photography, so I went and bought a used DSLR from a local hawk shop, and at the time I was just taking photos of just random things around my town, and I really didn't think they were any good. So my dad had arranged for me to Skype with Joel Sartore, who had taught a lecture that I had watched called The Fundamentals of Photography. And he had sent my work to Joel, and Joel had responded saying, Leah's well on her way in becoming not just a good photographer, but a great photographer, and I'm not kidding. And I guess since I was just 12 at the time, we found that quite a compliment, especially coming from Joel, because he's...
It's a huge compliment. Hi. Well done.
So I decided not to quit like I was going to, and after that comment, we decided that I would Skype with Joel regularly, and gradually he sort of told me to hone in on a certain aspect of photography that I was the best at, and he told me I was the best at portraiture. So I started to focus more on portraiture, and then gradually we had come to him with the idea of photographing people experiencing homelessness, and we had shown him a couple images, and he said he thought it was a great idea and really thought that the photos were turning out great. So we sort of went in that direction, and he helped a lot with suggesting that I use black and white backdrops and just helping with the lighting I use and stuff like that as well.
And your mom has she has a poignant story.
So yes, my mom's story is very interesting for sure. She was found on the streets of Calcutta, India at the age of 3, and she was brought to Mother Teresa's orphanage where she was raised till the age of 5 and adopted to Canada. So she was really homeless at a young age. And this isn't the reason that I began to photograph people experiencing homelessness, though it definitely has had an impact on me, probably only subconsciously.
So what was the reason that drew you in the first place?
So there's a British photographer named Lee Jeffries, and he also takes photos of people experiencing homelessness in black and white with high contrast. And when my dad showed me his work, I like really loved it, and I was really drawn to how he was able to encapsulate someone's story just through like their eyes and their gestures and stuff like that. And I really wanted to do that myself. So my dad suggested we go to Toronto and try photographing some people experiencing homelessness. And gradually, after meeting the people and talking to them, we realized how big of a problem homelessness was and how stereotyped it was as well. We came to see that these people are often quite kind and humble people, and you always hear such negative things about them, and really that's not the case. It could happen to any of us. So we decided to turn it into a project, and so we've been doing for about 4 years now.
And now you have Volume 2. Well, in Volume 2, you write, in India, where my mother was born, lower caste Hindus were once called untouchables. To touch such people, or even as was the case in South India, to look at them was to pollute oneself. People experiencing homelessness today, I would argue, are the untouchables of Western society. One must not touch them, lest one become dirty or infected with germs, or even make eye contact with them, lest one feel obligated to give them money. I think this is a shame, for people experiencing homelessness are some of the most pleasant people I have met. Devoid of possession, spurned by society, and beaten down by life, they are more often than not humble and grateful for any act of kindness shown to them. Doug, does that portrayal of the homelessness, people who are homeless, mesh with your experience with them at the homeless shelter?
No question. I think it's the idea that the people like to think they are invisible, and then eventually those individuals will feel invisible, and so people try to ignore them or don't want to have anything to do with them or think they may become unclean, if we can use that word again, by touching them or having contact with them. And yet, as Leah mentioned, they're not bad people. Maybe they've made bad choices, maybe they've made some bad decisions, but they're not bad people. It's just at that point in their life where they're at the bottom.
And having worked with people who are homeless, when we treat them like this, it must have an emotional impact beyond everything that they're facing on the streets.
No question. They can become defensive then, or they can become aggressive, depending on how they've been treated, how they've been reacted to. And so then they take that out in various ways, either, again, by being disrespectful to the other people, or being reclusive and keeping into themselves and in a sense, giving up all hope at that point.
And Leah's book mentions that several of her subjects have been kicked out of shelters. What are some of the biggest challenges you face in dealing with the homeless?
The biggest challenge is affordable housing, which is a whole different issue. But as they come to a shelter and as we're able to work with them, find out what their needs are, why they're in the situation they're in, and get them to the point, the idea is to get them to the point where they can be in independent living again. But once they come through a program, any type of program, or through a shelter, there's no place to refer them because there's not that affordable housing. Because again, there's different ideas. I know the government has a formula for affordable, but it more relates to the working poor rather than to those who are on the street. So then they become a community unto themselves because they stick together, they look after each other, they look out for each other, and then that becomes their community.
I'm having even just, every time I hear myself saying the homeless or homeless, the language also seems problematic.
Sure. I think it's not so much they're not homeless, they're houseless. In a sense of wherever you are is where your home is. And if they're in a shelter, that's their home. The government has allowed them to use a shelter address as their address. The phone number is at a shelter. If they're in a tent, that's their home. So what we want to do is find them a housing, a place where they can go that is their own, that they're in out of the elements, that they have a place to be comfortable and to be safe.
Leah, I want to get back into your book again, and you're right. It was a cold, blustery winter day as we started walking north on the Bayside Street toward Dunlop. My dad noticed Grant sitting on the steps of a business across the road from the Barrie Bayside Mission Center. When 45 minutes later, we returned, half frozen to our car, my dad saw that Grant was still sitting in the exact same spot in minus 15-degree weather and with bare hands. Grant agreed to have his picture taken and answer a few questions. The first question my dad asked was, "Aren't you cold?" "You get used to it." Grant told us he was staying at the center. "Do you like it there?" "They're always kind to me," Grant said, "and treat me with respect, which is more than I can say for those who see me on the street." Leah, what was it like your first interactions when you did see people on the street?
So at first, I didn't really want to take photos of people experiencing homelessness, but my dad thought it was a good idea, so I went with him. And of course, it was also easier because he approaches the people, which helps a lot because I don't really like talking to people.
You're doing great, though, right now.
And
because he records the interviews, right?
Yeah, he usually has a conversation with them while I take their photographs.
So in that first conversation, how did it shift for you?
So really after the first time we had gone out, I really realized that everything I had thought was sort of a lie. And that's the importance of not really just thinking what other people will tell you, of actually going out and seeing yourself. And like I said before, I came to realize that they're often very kind and humble people, and that's really not what I expected. And also what I didn't really realize was that it could literally be anybody. It could be me. It could be like my parents, my relatives. It just is a matter of circumstance in one's life, and not having people around you and the community to help you get out of that situation.
Do you think that's true, Doug? That people don't realize how easily it could happen to somebody?
No question. We find ourselves more and more dealing with what we term the working poor, those who are just at one paycheck away from being on the street. You only have so much money. Do I buy food for the family, or do I pay the heating bill? And so they're caught in that, the number of people that are working two jobs just in order to keep the household going. So yeah, there's a lot of people closer to this, and the age group is changing so that it's not
Is it becoming younger or older?
It's becoming younger. As we perceive, they look old because of the being out in the weather and the issues they've been through. They don't portray their correct age, but the age is coming down.
And how important in a project like this is it to maybe changing the perception of people who are living on the street?
I think the key to this whole thing is awareness, making other people aware that, as Leah has said, they're not bad people. And once you get to talk to them, once you get to know their story and understand what they've come through, it gives you a whole different idea of what these individuals are like. And
considering some of the pictures were taken at your shelter, what has the experience of the people who were featured like?
No question. It's a good thing for them. At first, I'm sure they're hesitant and thinking, what is going to happen and how's this going to turn out? But when they see their picture or when they read their story in print, and yeah, that in a sense, it gives them, wow, that's me, you know, and gives them a little sense of self-worth. And so then they're able to build on that, and we're able to build on that in their life.
And is there also like a sense of being seen? We're talking about people being invisible and people not seeing them. Do you think there's an aspect of someone's noticed me and wants to know what my story is?
Yeah, I definitely think that's the case. When we first started photographing people experiencing homelessness, we didn't really know if they would want to have their photograph taken or if it would even work at all. But to our surprise, almost all the people that we ask if they want to have their photo taken and to be asked a couple questions they're not only open to it, but quite excited to do that. And we were quite confused why that was, and we've come
why
to
they were excited.
Yeah. And we've come to realize that probably a lot of it has to do with like for posterity's sake, they don't want to just be forgotten on the streets, and they want to have their story read about, and for people hopefully to read their story and realize.
That they won't be forgotten.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think some of that is our fault, the general public, is that we think we don't want people to know about them. We don't want people to know what's happened to them. But it's these individuals that are coming and saying, yes, I want to tell my story so that others don't follow or fall into the same pitfalls. And so Leah's being able to bring them out of their shell and encourage them to talk about what their life is really all about.
Well, let's talk about some of those stories. In your first book, you feature somebody called Trevor, and he talks about not being able to sleep in a shelter because he has a dog. From your perspective, what role do pets play for the homeless?
Well, I've discovered that pets play a huge role in someone experiencing homelessness's life. Because often these people are on the streets by themselves. A pet can often be like a companion or a best friend, and we found that people experiencing homelessness often love their animals like to the extreme, and they'll make huge sacrifices to them. Like people experiencing homelessness have told me like they would go and feed their dog before they fed themselves, and also I don't know if it was Trevor specifically, but a man experiencing homelessness that had a dog told me one time that since there's only a couple of shelters in Toronto that will accept pets, which makes it very hard for someone to walk across Toronto to get to those specific shelters, and they're often overbooked because there are only a couple specific shelters that will accept animals. And for that reason, he often has to stay on the streets in extreme temperatures. And he explained to us that in order to get through nights where it's like -30 outside, he'll double the sleeping bags up, and then his little dog will climb down to his feet and sleep in the sleeping bag with him. And it's actually really sad, I think, because he's not going to abandon his best friend, of course, and it leaves him with no other option. And also a key factor that I've found as well, which I find very touching, is often people experiencing homelessness, their pets are often homeless as well, and they adopt them for that reason because they know what it's like to be thrown out on the streets alone and to not have anybody else, so they'll take care of each other.
So why don't more shelters allow people who are on the street to bring in their animals?
It's an awkward question. Sorry, not the question, the answer, in the sense of if it's a service dog or a service animal, no question, we can allow them in. The fact that it's dormitory style, it's communal living, one animal perhaps may work. What if we have 2 or 3 dogs that don't get along? How do we handle that? Now, not sure about Toronto. I know in Barrie, hasn't been too much of an issue. In fact, I don't recall anybody that's come that we've turned away. What we have done is, through the SPCA, try to arrange, can they look after the dog while you stay with us? That way we can deal with your problems and then get you reunited again. And that's the route that we would take. But as far as having them within the shelter, we're still dealing with that. No question, something we have to look at a little deeper, a little more serious, because of the number of people that have pets, because it's their family.
Right, and you're put in a position where you have to decide.
Exactly.
Leah, most of the photos in your book are shot against black and white, and there are very few shots that are street scenes. How do the beggar and the bag lady complement the other photos in your first book?
So I think they complement them in terms of, these are both images of people experiencing homelessness in black and white, like the other photographs. The only difference really is that these are candid images, as opposed to me speaking with the individual and setting a backdrop and such. For example, the bag lady, we had approached her and asked if I could take her photograph, and I think she must have had some sort of mental health problems, because she just started screaming at us. So we just sort of backed off. And my dad had said, since her face wouldn't be in the photograph, it would still probably make a good photograph. So we still took her photo. And then with the bagger as well, he was sleeping, and we didn't want to wake him up, and we didn't want to bother him by putting a backdrop behind him while he's sleeping. So I just took his photograph as well. And I think it's good, though, because it really shows them sort of in their environment, and that's why we chose to include those images as well.
And why black and white and high contrast?
Well, I prefer to shoot in black and white because I find color can often be distracting to the subject and what you're looking at, and I just prefer black and white in all aspects of photography that I do. I just find it's more
powerful.
More powerful.
I don't want to put words in your mouth, but
yeah, that's exactly what I meant. Yeah, more powerful for sure.
Alongside the photo of Bob in your first book, you write that he was one of your first portraits. You say you don't remember much about him except he had a smile that lit up his whole face. Why didn't you include the smile in the book?
So when I'm photographing someone experiencing homelessness, the photo shoot usually takes about 5-10 minutes. And during that time and speaking with the individual, I usually try and get a photograph that sort of encapsulates their personality through the little I can learn from them in that short amount of time. And with this photograph in particular, I can't remember exactly what I was thinking, as it was about 4 years ago now, but I'm sure in this case, however, his smile did strike us, and it's something that we remembered. It possibly wasn't what was showing his personality. We probably decided that the image where he wasn't smiling just really showed who he was more so. For example, he could have only smiled that one time, and that's what struck us. So we're just trying to sort of portray the person from what we can learn from them.
Because you asked the subjects not to smile, because I think the first thing people want to do when you say, I want to take your picture, is they want to smile, right?
Yeah, I do specifically ask them not to smile. Just because often when people smile, like it can be a very, very fake thing. And then usually after I already asked them that question, if they continue to smile and they just can't stop, then you really know, like, that's just their personality, and that's what I will capture. For example, when I was in Australia just a few months ago, I did take a photo of a woman who was smiling, but so I'm not really against that or anything, but it definitely just showed who she was and went really well with the story, so that's why we had chose.
And what do you think of the black and white? What do you think it brings to Leah's images?
I think it's perfect as far as depicting the lifestyle of an individual. It shows every mark. It highlights every detail of what they've been through. I think, as Leah said, the color would kind of soften some of that, but the black and white makes those lines, those worry lines, those leathery type faces from the elements. I think it brings out the lifestyle and the reality of what that person's been through.
And you pay every subject $10. How did you come to $10?
At the beginning, we had sort of just decided like $10 would be a good amount to pay an individual experiencing homelessness, because we don't want to give them nothing because they are modeling for us and they're giving us their time. And also they're often panhandling on the streets, so we don't want to just give them a bit of change. So we thought $10 would be a good amount. And also, since my dad and I have chose to donate the profits, 100% of the profits from all of the books back to homeless shelters, we're really not making any money back. So since all the money that we pay each individual comes right out of our pockets, it was sort of something that we could afford, since I have photographed a couple hundred people now, so that's a couple $1,000.
Well, in your first book, you say that you had one person you offered the $10 to, and they declined, and they wanted $20 instead.
Yeah.
Were you expecting that response?
We hadn't been expecting that response, though we sort of do now because we have gotten it a couple times. But we just have to explain to them, like, that's really all we can afford. Like I said before, we pay each individual, and I photograph hundreds of individuals, so until I actually start making money, that's really all we can do.
And Doug, what does $10 mean to somebody who's living on the street?
It's a gold mine, in a sense.
Because to us, it sounds like a coffee.
Exactly. And for them, it is a coffee, and maybe several coffees, but that's their coffee. And for them, that's, in a sense, it's free money. They do receive some type of assistance or government assistance, or they're on ODSP or something to that effect. But all of that's gobbled up real quick. So here's an opportunity that, a bonus. They've got something. It's a treat for them. And so they relish that idea.
And how much editing do you do with your photos, Leah?
I tried to do a minimal amount of editing because I don't want to change these people. Our main goal is to portray who they are, and that's why we try not to edit the images that much. I usually just make the images black and white and sort of boost the contrast a little bit. And
Do you always focus, or do you sometimes have blurry shots?
no, I always keep them in focus. Yeah, that's a big thing. And I usually just bring out the eyes a little bit. But that's
You
about
focus on
all.
the eyes. The windows to the soul, right? Doug, do you have a favorite of Leah's photos?
Grant is the one, the gentleman who sits across the road from the shelter. And again, because of the eyes, it tells his story. You can almost see his soul through his eyes. Yet at the same time, he's peering into our soul.
Do you know his story? What's his story?
There are those who have certain mental health issues or ideas, don't want to be in a shelter, don't want to be in a communal type setting. And so I think Grant's on the edge of that. He will only come a certain closeness. You're only allowed to get so close to him, and then he backs away. But through his eyes, you can see that there's a kindness there. There's something behind that. If we can just reach that or open that door for him, that's going to allow him to come out and be himself.
And Leah, a few months ago, you had the opportunity to travel to Australia to take part in the Women of the World Festival as a result of your books. How different is the homeless situation there than it is here?
I did notice a lot of similarities, but there were definitely a few differences as well. Because where we were located in Brisbane, Australia, it's very mild temperatures all year round. So pretty much our summer, and then just a bit hotter than that. So for people experiencing homelessness, it's a lot easier to sleep on the streets because it doesn't get to those extreme cold temperatures and snow and stuff like that there. So for that reason, it's a lot more comfortable to live on the streets. And also, where we were in Brisbane as well, the government gives money to all individuals that are Australian citizens who do not have a job. So for this reason, we did talk to about 2 people that said they love being homeless because they can just stay out in the nice weather and they get money from the government. And really their biggest worry is what they're going to eat for breakfast the next day. But
because I think a lot of people would be surprised to hear that.
Yeah, and we were too, because it's very the whole time I've been taking photographs of people experiencing homelessness in North America, we've only come across 2 out of a couple hundred that have actually chosen to be on the streets, and I definitely think that's the difference, just because of the weather there. Because I don't know who would ever choose to go out in -40 and go sleep outside. Like, I don't even want to go outside -40 at all. So I definitely think those were two big differences. However, apart from those two, everybody else said they did not choose to be on the streets, and they said who would choose to be on the streets. So it's definitely not.
It's not a choice.
They're not. Yeah. But it was sort of interesting that that one guy did bring that up, and it's more comfortable, I guess, than it is here.
Doug, in your foreword to Leah's first book, you wrote, "May this book inspire you to fight to alleviate the pain and suffering of those wanting to belong, of having somewhere to call home and people to call friends." Has Leah's work succeeded in achieving that goal?
It certainly has in our area, in the Barrie, the county of Simcoe, with the publication of the book and the advertising and Leah being out, being able to share the good news. Again, awareness is the key, and she's doing a great job of allowing people to become aware about these individuals rather than just trying to ignore them and walking by them. But now being able to know and say, okay, I recognize that person, not from a picture, but recognize the need of that person. And so what can we do about it? And as a result of that, people are responding. People are, whether it's a donation or whether it's a handout or a hand up or whether it's an arm around, people are becoming involved in doing something for this segment of the population. So it's been a great asset to that.
Well, Doug, thank you so much for all the work that you do in Barrie.
Thank you.
You've devoted your life to helping people that we ignore. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
And Leah, considering how young you are, I can only imagine what you're going to do in the next year or even 2 years. Thank you so much for your work.
Thank you.
And for being here.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario, helping businesses stay on the right side of change with strategic thinking, insightful decisions, and business leadership. Are you on the right side of change? Ask an Ontario CPA.